I wiped the flour from my hands, inhaling the sweet aroma of freshly baked cookies wafting through my kitchen. The front door creaked open, and I turned to see Derek sauntering in, his trademark charming smile plastered across his face. "Hey, darling, smell those cookies, but I have something even sweeter for you," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I couldn't help but smile back, even as a flicker of unease passed through me. There was something off about his expression, a darkness lurking beneath the surface that I couldn't quite place. "Oh, and what might that be?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart skipped a beat as he dropped to one knee. "Emma Rowland, will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. This was everything I'd ever dreamed of, wasn't it? Yet that nagging feeling of doubt persisted. "Derek, I don't know what to say," I stammered. His smile faltered for a moment. "Say yes. Of course. We're perfect together, Emma. Think about it. The successful marketing exec and the talented baker. We'll be unstoppable." I hesitated, my hand unconsciously moving to rest on my slightly swollen belly. We'd only known each other for 6 months, and I was already 3 months pregnant. It all felt so fast. "What about the baby?" I asked softly. Derek's eyes hardened for a split second before his charm offensive kicked back in. "That's why this is perfect timing, sweetheart. We'll be a real family." I took a deep breath, pushing my doubts aside. "Yes, Derek. Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on my finger and pulled me into a kiss. It should have been magical, but something felt off. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. I was at my parents' house, discussing flower arrangements with my mother, when my phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Sorry, babe. Late meeting. Don't wait up." I frowned, showing the message to my mom. "That's the 3rd time this week," I said. Mom patted my hand. "I'm sure he's just busy with work, dear. Planning a wedding and preparing for a baby is a lot of stress." I nodded, not entirely convinced. "I guess you're right." Later that evening, I was about to head home when I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. "I don't like it, Marge," my father's gruff voice carried. "Something's not right with that Derek fellow." "Oh, Harold, you're just being overprotective," Mom replied. "Emma's a grown woman. She can make her own choices. But a shotgun wedding, and have you seen the way he looks at her sometimes? Like she's, I don't know, a prize he's won?" I backed away, my heart pounding. Was I making a terrible mistake? The day of the wedding arrived all too quickly. As I stood in the bridal suite, adjusting my veil, my best friend Lily burst in, her face pale. "Emma, I need to talk to you," she said urgently. "Lily, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." She wrung her hands nervously. I saw Derek outside. He was on the phone, arguing with someone." My stomach dropped. "What did you hear?" Lily hesitated. He said, "Don't worry, baby. Once we're married, I'll have access to her trust fund. Then we can be together." The room spun around me. I clutched the vanity for support, my mind reeling. "Emma?" Lily's voice sounded far away. "What do you want to do?" I looked at my reflection in the mirror, at the hopeful bride staring back at me. In that moment, I knew I had a choice to make, one that would change the course of my life forever. "I need to talk to Derek," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Right now." I stared at the positive pregnancy test, a mix of joy and dread swirling in my stomach. Derek and I had been married for just 3 months, and already the cracks in our relationship were starting to show. I took a deep breath and headed downstairs to share the news. "Derek," I called out, entering the living room. He was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "What is it, Emma?" he asked, not bothering to look up. I swallowed hard. "I'm pregnant." His head snapped up, eyes wide. For a moment I saw a flicker of, was it panic? But then his trademark smile spread across his face. "That's wonderful, darling," he said, standing up to embrace me. But his hug felt stiff, forced. As the weeks passed, Derek's behavior became increasingly erratic. He'd come home late, reeking of alcohol and perfume that wasn't mine. When I'd confront him, he'd turn it around on me. "You're being paranoid, Emma," he'd snap. "This pregnancy is making you crazy." One night, I was folding laundry when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me. The text message preview made my blood run cold. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Don't forget the champagne. R." My hands shook as I put the phone down. I heard the front door open and Derek's footsteps on the stairs. "Hey, I'm heading out," he called. "Work dinner." I met him in the hallway, my heart pounding. "With R?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek's face hardened. "You went through my phone?" "Who is she, Derek?" He laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made me flinch. "You're being ridiculous, Emma. R is a client. Nothing more." But I saw the lie in his eyes. "Don't do this," I pleaded. "We're having a baby. We can work this out." Derek's expression softened, but there was no warmth in it. He cupped my face in his hands. "Oh, Emma, sweet, naive Emma, did you really think a baby would change anything?" I recoiled as if I'd been slapped. "What are you saying?" He sighed, dropping his hands. "I'm saying that this," he gestured between us, "was never meant to last. You were convenient, Emma, a pretty little housewife to show off at company parties, but you're not enough. You've never been enough." Tears streamed down my face. "But our vows, our baby." Derek's laugh was hollow. "Vows are just words, Emma. And as for the baby," he shrugged, "well, I'm sure you'll make a wonderful single mother." With that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me standing there, shattered and alone. The next few days passed in a blur of tears and sleepless nights. I was curled up on the couch when the doorbell rang. It was Margaret, Derek's mother. "Emma, dear," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I came as soon as I heard. How are you holding up?" I broke down in her arms, sobbing out the whole story. Margaret listened, her face growing darker with each word. "That boy," she muttered. "I raised him better than this." As we sat talking, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Emma, it's Rachel. We need to talk. Derek's been lying to both of us." I showed Margaret the message, my hands shaking. "Oh, honey," Margaret said, squeezing my hand. "What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, feeling a spark of determination ignite within me. "I'm going to meet her," I said, "and then I'm going to make Derek pay for what he's done to us." As I typed out a response to Rachel, I felt a shift inside me. The old Emma, sweet, trusting, naive, was gone. In her place was a woman scorned, a mother to be ready to fight for her future. "Game on, Derek," I whispered to myself. "You have no idea what's coming." I stood in the bustling cafe, my heart pounding as I scanned the room for Rachel. A petite blonde waved from a corner table, and I steeled myself as I approached. "Emma?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, sliding into the seat across from her. "Rachel, I presume?" She looked nothing like I'd imagined. Young, yes, but with a vulnerability in her eyes that caught me off guard. "I'm so sorry," Rachel blurted out. "I had no idea Derek was married. He told me you two were separated." I felt a familiar ache in my chest. "How long?" I managed to ask. 6 months, she whispered. "But last week I saw his wedding ring. When I confronted him, he laughed it off, said it didn't mean anything. Just anger flared inside me. That sounds like Derek." Rachel's eyes widened. "There's more. I think he's been stealing from the company. I saw some suspicious transfers on his laptop." My mind raced. Could this be the leverage I needed? Our conversation was cut short by my phone ringing. It was the hospital. I was in labor. "I have to go," I said, standing abruptly. "My water just broke." Rachel looked panicked. "Do you need help? Should I call Derek?" I shook my head. "No, I'll be fine on my own." But as I rushed to the hospital, pain searing through me, I realized how alone I truly was. Hours passed in a blur of agony and fear. Where was Derek? I'd left messages, but he was nowhere to be found. As another contraction hit, I gripped my mother's hand. "I can't do this," I sobbed. Mom stroked my hair. "Yes, you can, Emma. You're stronger than you know." With one final push, my daughter entered the world. As I held her tiny form, a fierce love unlike anything I'd ever known washed over me. "Hello, Ava," I whispered. "It's just you and me now." It wasn't until hours later that Derek finally showed up, reeking of alcohol. "Where have you been?" I hissed, careful not to wake Ava. He shrugged, barely glancing at the baby. "Out. Had some things to take care of." "Things?" I echoed, disbelief turning to rage. "Your daughter was being born." Derek's eyes hardened. "Don't start, Emma. I'm here now, aren't I?" "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. He laughed. "You can't be serious." "I know about Rachel," I spat. "And the money you've been stealing. Get out before I call security." For a moment, fear flashed across Derek's face. Then his mask of indifference slipped back into place. "Fine," he sneered. "Have fun playing single mom. We both know you can't handle it." As he stormed out, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. What had I done? The next few days were a haze of sleepless nights, and tearful phone calls. My parents were a godsend, helping with Ava and offering words of encouragement. "You've got this, sweetheart," Dad said one evening as I struggled to soothe a colicky Ava. One day at a time. A week after bringing Ava home, I received a text from Rachel. "Emma, I have proof of Derek's embezzlement. Meet me tomorrow?" As I typed my reply, a plan began to form in my mind. Derek had taken so much from me, my trust, my security, my dreams of a happy family. But I refused to let him take my future. I looked down at Ava, peacefully sleeping in her bassinet. "We're going to be okay, little one," I whispered. "Mommy's going to make sure of it." With newfound determination, I began to plot my revenge. Derek had no idea what was coming, but he was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially when that woman is a mother protecting her child. The first few months of single motherhood were a blur of sleepless nights and tear-stained onesies. Ava was colicky, and I was a mess. But with each passing day, I found a strength I never knew I had. One particularly rough morning, as I rocked a wailing Ava, my mom appeared at my door with a casserole and a determined look. "Emma, honey," she said, taking Ava from my arms, "you need a break. Go take a shower, I've got this." I hesitated, but the allure of hot water and 5 minutes of peace was too tempting to resist. As I stood under the spray, I felt the weight of the past few months wash over me. I sobbed, letting out all the pain and frustration I'd been holding in. When I emerged, feeling somewhat human again, I found Mom in the kitchen, Ava peacefully sleeping in her arms. "How did you do that?" I asked, amazed. She smiled. "Years of practice, dear. Now sit down. We need to talk about your future." Over the next hour, we hatched a plan. I'd start a small baking business from home, allowing me to care for Ava while earning an income. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Weeks passed, and word of my baked goods spread through the neighborhood. I was exhausted but fulfilled, finally feeling like I was regaining control of my life. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, everything changed. I was elbow-deep in cookie dough when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Derek standing there, looking haggard but still infuriatingly handsome. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cold. He ran a hand through his hair. I need your help, Emma. I've lost everything. My job, my apartment. Rachel left me." I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, quickly followed by anger. "And that's my problem because I'm still Ava's father," he said, his eyes pleading. "I want to make things right, for her." I was about to slam the door in his face when Ava toddled into view. "Dada?" she said, her little face lighting up. My heart clenched. I couldn't deny her a relationship with her father, no matter how much I wanted to. "You can see her," I said finally, "but on my terms, and you need to get your life together first." Derek nodded eagerly. "I will, I promise. Thank you, Emma." As he left, I felt a mix of emotions churning inside me. Had I made the right decision? That night, as I was going through some old papers, I stumbled upon our joint bank statements. Something caught my eye, a series of large withdrawals made just before our separation. With growing horror, I realized Derek had emptied our savings account. Fury coursed through me. How dare he come here, playing the repentant father, when he'd stolen our daughter's future? I called my parents, my voice shaking with rage as I explained what I'd discovered. "Oh, sweetheart," Dad said, his voice grave. "You need to talk to a lawyer. This changes everything." The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to a highly recommended divorce attorney. The second was to Derek. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. "And this time you're going to tell me the whole truth, or so help me, you'll never see Ava again." There was a long pause before Derek replied, his voice uncharacteristically small. "Okay, Emma, you're right. It's time you knew everything." As I hung up, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it, the moment that would define our future. I looked at Ava, playing happily with her blocks, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. "It's going to be okay, baby girl," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Mommy's going to make sure of it." With renewed determination, I began to prepare for the battle ahead. Derek had no idea what was coming, but I was ready. It was time to fight for the future Ava and I deserved. The aroma of freshly baked cinnamon rolls filled the air as I put the finishing touches on Ava's birthday cake. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when Derek walked out on us, and life had taken unexpected turns. "Mommy, is it time yet?" Ava's excited voice called from the living room. I smiled, my heart swelling with love. "Almost, sweetie. Why don't you help Grandma set the table?" As I watched Ava skip off, I marveled at how far we'd come. My little home bakery had flourished thanks to word of mouth and a loyal customer base. It wasn't always easy, but we were making it work. The doorbell rang, and I wiped my hands on my apron before answering. To my surprise, it wasn't a guest for Ava's party, but a smartly dressed woman I didn't recognize. "Emma Rowland?" she asked, her tone professional. I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. "I'm Olivia Chen from Le Petit Gâteau. We've heard great things about your baking, and we'd like to offer you a position as our new pastry chef." My jaw dropped. Le Petit Gâteau was one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm flattered," I stammered. "But I have a daughter to consider and my home business." Olivia smiled warmly. "We understand. The position comes with flexible hours and a substantial salary increase. Why don't you come by tomorrow for a trial run?" As she left, my mind was reeling. This could change everything for Ava and me. But could I really balance it all? The party was a whirlwind of laughter and sugar-fueled excitement. As I watched Ava blow out her candles, I made a silent wish for guidance. The next day, I dropped Ava off at school and headed to Le Petit Gâteau, my stomach in knots. The kitchen was a hive of activity, and I threw myself into the work, losing track of time as I created delicate pastries and intricate desserts. It wasn't until I glanced at the clock that I realized with horror that I was late picking up Ava. I rushed out, apologizing profusely to the head chef. When I arrived at the school, Ava was sitting alone on the steps, her little face tear-stained. "I'm so sorry, baby," I said, pulling her into a hug. "Mommy lost track of time." Ava's lower lip trembled. "You forgot about me?" Her words pierced my heart. "Never, sweetheart. I could never forget about you." As we drove home, I wrestled with my decision. The job was amazing, but at what cost? Just as we pulled into our driveway, my phone rang. It was Olivia, offering me the position. "We were impressed with your work today," she said. "We'd love to have you join our team." I took a deep breath, about to decline, when Ava spoke up from the back seat. "Mommy, did you make yummy cakes today?" I smiled at her through the rearview mirror. "I did, sweetie. How would you feel if Mommy made cakes at a fancy restaurant sometimes?" Ava's eyes lit up. "Can I come and taste them?" Suddenly, I saw a way forward. "Olivia," I said into the phone, "I'd love to accept, but I need to discuss some terms about my schedule." After hanging up, I turned to Ava. "How about we celebrate with some ice cream?" As we sat at the kitchen table, enjoying our sundaes, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We could make this work. I could have my career and be there for Ava. But just as I was basking in this moment of triumph, a familiar face caught my eye through the window. Derek was walking up our driveway, looking as handsome and charming as ever. My blood ran cold. What was he doing here? And why now, when everything was finally falling into place? As the doorbell rang, I knew I had to make a decision. Face Derek and potentially disrupt the life we'd built, or pretend we weren't home and keep him out of our lives for good. Ava looked at me, curiosity in her eyes. "Mommy, who's that man?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "That, sweetheart, is your father, and it's time we had a long overdue conversation." The aroma of roast turkey filled Margaret's house as I put the finishing touches on my pumpkin pie. Thanksgiving had always been a big deal in the Rowland family, but this year felt different. Tension hung in the air like a thick fog, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. "Emma, dear, could you help me with these plates?" Margaret called from the dining room. As I arranged the china, I caught sight of Derek through the window, pulling up in his flashy sports car. My stomach churned. It had been months since I'd last seen him, and the memory of our encounter at Le Petit Gâteau still burned. "Grandma, look, Daddy's here!" Ava squealed, running to the door. I exchanged a glance with Margaret, whose lips were pressed into a thin line. She knew as well as I did that Derek's presence would complicate things. The moment Derek walked in, the atmosphere shifted. He scooped Ava up, showering her with kisses and presents, while barely acknowledging me or his mother. As we gathered around the table, I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on us. Margaret cleared her throat, her voice strained as she asked us to join hands for grace. That's when I saw a flash of red on Derek's collar. Lipstick. My heart raced as I remembered Rachel, the young woman I'd seen him with at the restaurant. Throughout the meal, Derek regaled everyone with tales of his business successes, carefully omitting any mention of his personal life. But I couldn't stay silent any longer. The truth was clawing its way up my throat, demanding to be heard. "So, Derek," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "how's Rachel doing these days?" The table fell silent. Derek's fork clattered against his plate. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but the panic in his eyes told a different story. "Oh, I think you do," I pressed on, fueled by years of pent-up anger. "I saw you with her at Le Petit Gâteau. You looked quite cozy." Margaret gasped, her eyes darting between Derek and me. "Son, what is she talking about?" And just like that, the dam broke. Words poured out of me, every lie, every betrayal, every moment of heartache Derek had caused over the years. I told them about the affair, the stolen money, the broken promises. Derek's face contorted with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I've always provided for Ava." "Provided?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the child support checks that bounce half the time? Or the promises to show up that you never keep?" Margaret's face had gone pale. "Derek, is this true? Have you been lying to all of us?" For a moment I saw a flicker of shame cross Derek's face, but it was quickly replaced by his usual charm offensive. "Mom, you know me," he said, reaching for Margaret's hand. "Emma's just bitter. She's always been jealous of my success." But Margaret pulled away, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and disappointment. "I think I'm finally seeing you clearly for the first time, Derek, and I don't like what I see." The room erupted into chaos. Derek yelled, Margaret cried, and Ava, confused and frightened, clung to my leg. In the midst of it all, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was finally out. As Derek stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I turned to Margaret. Her face was streaked with tears, but there was a resolve in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "Emma," she said, taking my hand, "I owe you an apology, and I think it's time we had a long talk about how we're going to make things right." In that moment, looking at Margaret's determined face and feeling Ava's small hand in mine, I realized that this was far from over. The real battle was just beginning, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. The weeks following Thanksgiving were a whirlwind. With Margaret's unwavering support and my parents rallying around me, I felt stronger than ever. But I knew Derek wouldn't go down without a fight. I was in the bakery, up to my elbows in bread dough, when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Emma, we need to talk. It's about Derek." My heart raced as I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe. When I arrived, Rachel looked a mess, her eyes red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair disheveled. "He's been lying to me," she blurted out. "To everyone. I found documents. Emma, he's been embezzling from his company, and there's more." As Rachel spilled Derek's secrets, my mind reeled. The affairs, the stolen money, the web of lies, it was worse than I'd imagined. "I'm so sorry," Rachel sobbed. "I had no idea about you and Ava. I'm leaving him." I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "It's not your fault. Derek fooled us all." Armed with this new information, I felt a surge of determination. It was time to end Derek's games once and for all. But Derek had one last card to play. The next morning, as I opened the bakery, he was waiting for me. "Emma," he said, his voice honey-sweet, "we need to talk." I steeled myself, letting him in. "Make it quick, Derek, I have work to do." I did. He paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. "I've been thinking about us, about our family. I want to make things right." I laughed bitterly. "Right? After everything you've done?" "I know I've made mistakes," he pleaded. "But I love you, Emma. I love Ava. Give me another chance." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with, but then I remembered Rachel's words, the years of lies and betrayal. "No, Derek," I said firmly. "It's too late for that." His face darkened. "You don't want to do this, Emma. I can make things very difficult for you." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "I'm just saying, it would be a shame if something happened to your little bakery, or if Ava found out what a vindictive bitch her mother really is." White-hot anger surged through me. "Get out," I hissed. "Now." As Derek turned to leave, a small voice piped up from the doorway. "Mommy? Why is Daddy being mean?" Ava stood there, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Derek's face paled. "Sweetheart, it's not what you think," he stammered. But Ava backed away, tears welling in her eyes. "You're a bad man," she whispered before running upstairs. Derek looked stricken. "Emma, Save it," I snapped. "You've done enough damage. But let me make one thing clear. If you ever threaten me or Ava again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are." As Derek slunk out, I sank to the floor, my body shaking with adrenaline and emotion. I'd stood up to him, but at what cost? How could I protect Ava from the fallout? My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Just heard from Derek. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" I was about to reply when I noticed something odd. The safe where I kept the bakery's cash was ajar. With trembling hands I opened it, my heart sinking as I realized the truth. It was empty. Every last dollar gone. In that moment, as I stared at the bare safe, Ava's sobs echoing from upstairs, I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. How could I have been so blind? So trusting? But as I clenched my fists, a new resolve hardened within me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Derek had taken my money, threatened my daughter, and tried to manipulate me one last time. Now, it was my turn to fight back, and this time, I wouldn't stop until justice was served. The morning sun streamed through the bakery windows as I surveyed the empty shelves. Derek's theft had left me with nothing, but I refused to let it break me. I had one last card to play. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" Margaret asked, her voice laced with concern. I nodded, my jaw set with determination. It's time Derek faced the consequences of his actions. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number Rachel had given me. "Hello? This is Emma Rowland. I have information about Derek Rowland's embezzlement scheme." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Police officers swarmed the bakery, taking statements and collecting evidence. As I watched Derek being led away in handcuffs, a mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, sadness, and a glimmer of hope for the future. Weeks passed, and slowly, life began to take on a new rhythm. The community rallied around me, offering support and encouragement. Margaret, bless her heart, had set up a GoFundMe to help me rebuild the bakery. One particularly busy morning, as I juggled trays of fresh croissants, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see a tall, distinguished man with kind eyes. "Emma Rowland?" he asked, smiling warmly. "I'm Robert Weinstein. I heard about your situation and I'd like to help." Robert, it turned out, was a successful restaurateur with a passion for mentoring up-and-coming bakers. Over coffee and my signature cinnamon rolls, we talked for hours about recipes, business strategies, and dreams for the future. As the weeks turned into months, Robert became more than just a mentor. His steady presence and unwavering support helped heal wounds I didn't even know I had. And Ava adored him, often begging him to tell her stories about his travels and culinary adventures. On the day of Derek's sentencing, I stood in the courtroom, my heart pounding. As the judge read out his verdict, guilty on all counts, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was finally over. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by my parents, Margaret, and Robert, I took a deep breath of fresh air. "So what now?" my mom asked, squeezing my hand. I smiled, looking at the faces of those who had stood by me through it all. "Now, we build something beautiful." And that's exactly what we did. With Robert's guidance and the community's support, my little bakery blossomed into a thriving business. But more importantly, I blossomed too. 1 year to the day after Derek's arrest, I stood in my newly expanded kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a wedding cake. As I piped delicate sugar flowers, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished steel countertop. The woman staring back at me was stronger, wiser, and happier than I'd ever been. "Mommy, look!" Ava's excited voice pulled me from my reverie. She proudly held up a slightly lopsided cupcake, frosted in every color of the rainbow. "I made it all by myself." I scooped her up, planting a kiss on her flour-dusted cheek. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Just like you." Robert appeared in the doorway, his eyes twinkling. "I'd say you both inherited the baking gene," he chuckled, wrapping us in a warm embrace. As we stood there, flour-covered and laughing, I realized that this moment of pure joy and love was what I'd been fighting for all along. Derek had tried to break me, but instead he'd set me free. Free to find my strength, my voice, and a love that was real and true. I looked at Robert, at Ava, and at the life we were building together. You know what? I said, my heart full to bursting. I think it's time for a celebration. Who wants to help me bake a new beginnings cake? As Ava cheered and Robert rolled up his sleeves, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been long and painful, but it had led me here, to a place of love, strength, and endless possibilities. And for that, I was grateful. Life, I realized, was a lot like baking. Sometimes you had to endure the heat to create something truly sweet. And this was the sweetest victory of all.